They found my daughter Paige's body in a dumpster behind Luigi's restaurant. 3 bullets to the head, execution style. The detective's voice cracked when he told me they carved the letter S into her forehead. 23 years old, art student, never hurt a soul. But I knew something the cops didn't know yet. I wasn't just a grieving father. I was a Black Ops assassin who'd killed for my country for 2 decades. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. 20 years in Black Ops teaches you that calls at this hour only bring death. I answered on the second ring, already reaching for the Glock under my pillow. Is this Adrian Blackwood? The voice was tired, official. Detective. Speaking. Sir, I'm Detective Grant Morrison with Metro PD. I need you to come down to the station. It's about your daughter Paige. My blood turned to ice. Paige. My little girl who used to paint flowers on napkins at restaurant tables. Who called me every Sunday, even though we barely spoke after her mother and I divorced 5 years ago. What happened? Silence. Then a deep breath. Sir, I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Tell me now. My voice carried that edge that made enemy combatants talk. It worked on cops too. Your daughter was found deceased at approximately 11:30 p.m. behind Luigi's Italian restaurant on 5th Street. Mr. Blackwood, I'm very sorry for your loss. The room started spinning. Paige, dead. My hands, steady enough to take out targets from 800 yards, were shaking like autumn leaves. How? 3 gunshot wounds to the head. Execution style. And sir, he paused. There's something else. The killer carved the letter S into her forehead. This appears to be gang-related. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I could see her last Christmas, laughing as she tried to teach me how to use Instagram. Her bright smile. Those green eyes just like her mother's. Mr. Blackwood, are you there? I'll be right there. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my apartment. Gang-related. Execution style. The letter S carved into her beautiful face. This wasn't random. In my world, nothing ever was. I pulled on jeans and a black hoodie, the same way I used to dress for night missions in Syria. But as I grabbed my keys, something felt wrong. Paige lived in the suburbs, went to art school, worked at a coffee shop. She didn't run with gangs. She didn't even drink. Why would anyone want my daughter dead? At the station, Detective Morrison was waiting with coffee and tired eyes. He looked like he'd seen too much death lately. Mr. Blackwood, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask some questions about Paige's activities, her friends, anyone she might have had conflict with. I stared at the photos on his desk. Crime scene shots. My daughter's body crumpled like a broken doll. The S carved deep into her forehead, still bleeding. She was a good kid, I said quietly. Art student at Metro University. Worked part-time at Sunrise Coffee on campus. No drugs, no criminal friends, no debts. Any boyfriends? Ex-boyfriends who might have been jealous or violent. She was dating some kid named Mason from her painting class. Nice boy. Quiet. Morrison nodded, scribbling notes. What about you, Mr. Blackwood? What do you do for work? Here it was. The question I'd been dreading for 5 years since I went civilian. I'm a security consultant. It was my standard cover story. I help companies protect their executives. Any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt you through your daughter. I met his eyes. 20 years of classified missions flashed through my mind. Terrorist cells I'd dismantled. Cartel leaders I'd eliminated. Dictators whose governments I'd toppled. The list of people who wanted me dead could fill a phone book. But they were all dead. Or in maximum security prisons. Or hiding in caves on the other side of the world. No, I lied. Nothing like that. Morrison studied me for a moment, and I could see him trying to figure out what I wasn't telling him. Good cop instincts. Mr. Blackwood, I have to ask this. The S carved into your daughter's forehead. Does that symbol mean anything to you? I shook my head, but my mind was racing. S could mean anything in the criminal world. Supremacy, soldier, serpent, or it could be personal. A signature. We think it might be connected to the Serpent Street gang. They've been expanding their territory lately, and this kind of execution is their calling card. Serpent Street. I'd heard whispers about them during my last mission in Mexico. Ruthless. Connected. But why would they target Paige? Morrison handed me his card. We're going to catch whoever did this, Mr. Blackwood. I promise you that. I took the card, knowing he was wrong. The police worked within the law, followed procedures, gathered evidence. That took months, sometimes years. I had different methods. As I walked out of the station at dawn, I felt something I hadn't felt since retiring from Black Ops. The hunt was calling me back. Someone had made the mistake of killing Adrian Blackwood's daughter. Now they were going to learn what 20 years of government-sanctioned killing had taught me about revenge. 3 days later, I stood in a crowded funeral home watching people who barely knew my daughter pretend to grieve. The casket was closed, Detective Morrison's recommendation. Too much damage, he'd said quietly. My ex-wife Amelia sat in the front row, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She'd remarried 2 years ago to some accountant named Colin who kept checking his phone during the service. Real class act. She was such a bright light, the pastor was saying. Some generic eulogy about a girl he'd never met. Taken too soon by senseless violence. Senseless. That word kept bothering me. Nothing about Paige's murder was senseless. 3 bullets to the head wasn't a robbery gone wrong. The S carved into her forehead wasn't gang initiation. This was professional work. After the service, people filed past offering their condolences. Classmates from art school, her manager from the coffee shop, her boyfriend Mason, crying harder than anyone. Poor kid looked like he hadn't slept since it happened. Mr. Blackwood? A woman's voice interrupted my thoughts. She was mid-40s, professional-looking, with sharp eyes that reminded me of CIA handlers. I'm Quinn Harrison, Paige's art professor. Nice to meet you. I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. Paige was one of my most talented students. She paused, glancing around nervously. Could we speak privately for a moment? We stepped outside onto the funeral home's porch. The October air was crisp, reminding me of morning briefings in Afghanistan. Professor Harrison, was there something specific you wanted to tell me? She looked over her shoulder again, then leaned closer. The police asked about Paige's recent behavior, whether she seemed scared or troubled. And I told them no, but that wasn't entirely true. Quinn's hands were shaking as she pulled out a cigarette. About 2 weeks before she died, Paige came to my office completely shaken up. She said she'd seen something she shouldn't have seen. My blood went cold. What kind of something? She wouldn't give me details. Just kept saying she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She asked if I knew any lawyers, said she might need to go to the police, but was scared. Did she mention any names? Places? No, but... Quinn took a long drag. She did say something strange. She said she'd been sketching in Riverside Park that night. You know how she loved to draw by the river. When she came to my office, she had this detailed drawing with her. What was in the drawing? Men in expensive suits. Really detailed faces. She was incredibly gifted at portraits. But here's the thing. She said she'd drawn it from memory of something she witnessed. Something violent. My hands clenched into fists. Paige had seen a crime go down. Maybe a murder. And instead of running, my artistic daughter had memorized the faces and drawn them later. Professor Harrison, do you still have that drawing? No. She took it with her. Said she was going to think about whether to take it to the police. Quinn's voice cracked. I should have pushed her to report it immediately. This isn't your fault. The next time I saw her was on the news. Dead. After Quinn left, I sat in my truck outside the funeral home, processing this new information. Paige hadn't been a random victim. She'd witnessed something big enough to get her killed for it. I pulled out my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Ryder speaking. The voice was gruff, military. It's Adrian. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ, Blackwood. Heard about your daughter on the encrypted channels. I'm sorry, man. Ryder Torres. Former Delta Force, current information broker for people like us. If anyone could dig up intel on what Paige had witnessed, It was him. I need a favor, Ryder. Off the books. Name it. 2 weeks ago, something went down in Riverside Park. Something big enough to kill a witness over. I need to know what. You thinking this is connected to your girl? I know it is. Give me 6 hours. I'll call you back. While I waited, I drove to Paige's apartment. The police had already processed the scene, but they weren't looking for what I was looking for. Her art supplies were scattered across her desk. Sketches of trees, buildings, people, but no detailed portraits of men in suits. Whoever killed her had been here first. I was about to leave when I noticed something the cops had missed. Behind her easel, wedged between the wall and the wooden frame, was a small piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a sketch. Not the detailed one Quinn had described, but a rough draft. 2 men in expensive suits standing over what looked like a body near water. One of the men had a distinctive scar across his left cheek. At the bottom, in Paige's careful handwriting, Friday, October 4th, Riverside Park, 11:45 p.m. That was 2 weeks ago, the night she'd seen something she shouldn't have. My phone buzzed. Ryder, you sitting down, Adrian? Talk to me. October 4th, Riverside Park. Victor Castellano's nephew, Julian, was found floating in the river the next morning. Apparent suicide according to the official report, but my sources say it was an execution. Victor Castellano. I knew that name from intelligence briefings. East Coast mob family. Ruthless. Connected to everything from drug trafficking to political corruption. Why would they kill the nephew? Word is Julian was skimming from the family business. Victor doesn't tolerate that kind of disrespect, even from blood. And my daughter saw it happen. Looks that way. Adrian, listen to me carefully. Victor Castellano isn't some street-level dealer. This guy has judges in his pocket, cops on his payroll, and a body count that would make some of our old targets look like choir boys. I stared at the sketch in my hands. My daughter's final masterpiece. Evidence that would bring down a mob boss. Where can I find him? Adrian, don't. Call the FBI. Let them handle this. Where? Ryder sighed. He runs his operation out of Castellano's restaurant downtown. But the place is a fortress. Armed security, surveillance, the works. Thanks, Ryder. Adrian, wait. I hung up. 23 years old. Art student. Never hurt anyone. But Paige had been brave enough to memorize the faces of killers and consider going to the police. Now Victor Castellano was about to learn what happened when you murdered the daughter of a man trained to kill by the United States government. The funeral was over, but my war was just beginning. That night, I drove to a warehouse on the industrial side of town, the kind of place that didn't exist on any official maps. Felix Chun was waiting for me in the shadows, smoking a cigarette like old times. Felix had been my weapons specialist in Syria. Now he ran a completely legal import business that occasionally helped former operators acquire untraceable equipment. Heard through the grapevine you might need some hardware, Felix said, crushing his cigarette under his boot. Victor Castellano. Felix whistled low. You sure about this path, Adrian? Guy's got half the city on his payroll. He killed my daughter. Then we better make sure you don't join her. Felix led me into the warehouse. Rows of shipping containers lined the walls, but I knew the real inventory was hidden beneath false floors and secret compartments. Talk to me about Castellano's security, I said. Professional grade. Ex-military guys, probably some dirty cops mixed in. His restaurant has facial recognition cameras, metal detectors, and at least 6 armed guards at any given time. Felix pulled out a tablet. But here's what's interesting. Every Tuesday night, he meets with his lieutenants at his private club on Elm Street. Smaller venue, less security. How do you know all this? Because 3 months ago, a rival family tried to take him out. They failed, obviously, but not before I sold them some very expensive toys they never got to use. Felix opened a shipping container and pulled back a tarp. Underneath was enough firepower to level a city block. What are you thinking? Sniper rifle? Remote explosives? Information first. I need to know everyone in his organization, their routines, their weaknesses. I picked up a compact pistol, checking its weight. This isn't about killing one man, Felix. This is about dismantling an empire. Spoken like a true operator. 2 hours later, I walked out with a duffel bag containing surveillance equipment, encrypted communication devices, and enough untraceable weapons to fight a small war. But hardware was only half the battle. I needed intelligence. I drove across town to a dive bar called Murphy's, the kind of place where conversations happened in dark corners and nobody asked questions about the past. Tristan Murphy was polishing glasses behind the bar, his thick Irish accent still strong after 30 years in America. He'd been an IRA informant before switching sides and helping the CIA track down terrorist cells in Europe. Now he ran this bar and brokered information for the right price. Adrian Bloody Blackwood, Tristan said without looking up. Thought you'd retired from the killing business. Someone made it personal. I heard about your girl. Terrible thing. He set down the glass. Victor Castellano, I'm guessing? What do you know? Tristan poured 2 whiskeys. No, he's been expanding aggressively. Took over 3 rival operations in the past 6 months. His method is always the same. Make an example of the leadership, absorb the soldiers. Who are his key people? His right-hand man is Dominic Torino. Former boxer, handles enforcement. Then there's Blake Matthews, handles the money laundering through a chain of construction companies. And his nephew Oliver runs street operations. I memorized every name. In Black Ops, intelligence was more valuable than ammunition. Here's what you really need to know, Tristan continued. Victor's got protection from someone high up. Federal level. Word is he's been feeding information to the FBI about rival families in exchange for immunity. A snitch. A very well-protected snitch. You go after him directly, you'll have federal agents knocking down your door within hours. I finished my whiskey, thinking. In Syria, we'd faced similar problems, targets with government protection. The solution was never direct assault. I need blueprints, I said. Castellano's restaurant, his club, his home. Everything. That'll cost you. I pulled out an envelope containing $10,000 in cash. Tristan's eyes widened. Jesus, Adrian. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Give me 48 hours. As I left Murphy's, my encrypted phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. And I knew that signature. Nathaniel Cross, former NSA analyst who'd gone private after a scandal involving leaked classified documents. If Nathan was reaching out, it meant he'd been monitoring communications related to Victor Castellano. I drove to the agreed meeting point, a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. Nathaniel was already there, looking paranoid and drinking his 3rd cup of coffee. You're poking a hornet's nest, he said without preamble. Good. Victor Castellano isn't just mob, Adrian. He's connected to some very dangerous people. Government contractors. Black budget operations. The kind of stuff that makes our old missions look like neighborhood watch duty. Meaning if you go after him the wrong way, you won't just disappear. Everyone you've ever cared about will disappear too. I thought about Amelia, my ex-wife. About the few friends I had left from the old days. What aren't you telling me, Nathan? He slid a manila envelope across the table. Castellano's been laundering money for a defense contractor called Apex Industries. They develop weapons for government black sites. The kind of weapons that don't officially exist. I opened the envelope. Bank records. Wire transfers. Amounts that made my head spin. How much are we talking about? 50 million over the past 2 years. And here's the kicker. Some of those weapons ended up in the hands of terrorist cells we were tracking in Afghanistan. My blood turned to ice. American weapons. Sold to the same people who tried to kill me and my team overseas. Victor's not just a mob boss, I said quietly. He's a traitor. Now you're getting it. And your daughter stumbled into something that could bring down a network spanning from City Hall to the Pentagon. I closed the envelope, my mind racing. This wasn't just about avenging Paige anymore. This was about exposing a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Nathan, I need everything you have on Apex Industries. Already loaded on this drive. He handed me an encrypted USB stick. But Adrian, be careful. These people have resources we never had access to. They can make problems disappear permanently. As Nathan left, I sat in the diner processing everything I'd learned. Victor Castellano had killed my daughter to protect a $50 million weapons trafficking operation. He'd picked the wrong father to cross. The encrypted drive contained enough evidence to topple governments. I spent the next 12 hours in my apartment, going through financial records, shipping manifests, and surveillance photos that painted a picture of corruption stretching from Victor's restaurant to the halls of Congress. But it was the final folder that made my hands shake with rage. Video surveillance from Riverside Park. October 4th, 11:43 p.m. I watched my daughter's final moments play out on the screen. She was sitting on a bench by the river, sketching pad in her lap, completely absorbed in her art. She always loved drawing at night when the city lights reflected off the water. Then I saw them, two figures approaching from the shadows. Victor Castellano himself, unmistakable with his silver hair and expensive coat. And beside him, a younger man I recognized from the files, his nephew Julian. But this wasn't the execution Nathan's sources had described. This was something else entirely. The audio was fuzzy, but I could make out Victor's voice, cold and calculating. You've been stealing from family, Julian. That's unforgivable. Julian was on his knees, begging. Uncle Victor, please. I can pay it back. You needed to respect the family name. Victor pulled out a pistol. Instead, you embarrassed us. Made us look weak. That's when Paige looked up from her sketching. Even from the grainy surveillance footage, I could see the exact moment she realized what she was witnessing. Her eyes went wide. She started to pack up her art supplies quietly, trying not to draw attention. But Victor had already seen her. We have a witness, he said calmly. Julian's execution was swift, 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head. Professional. Clean. But Victor didn't leave immediately. He walked toward Paige's bench while she fumbled with her art supplies, trying to run. The camera angle shifted, and I lost visual for 30 seconds. When the feed came back, Paige was gone. Victor was making a phone call. I fast-forwarded through the rest of the footage. Police arrived an hour later, found Julian's body, and ruled it a suicide. Perfect cover-up. But I knew what had really happened. Victor had let Paige go that night because killing a witness in a public park would have drawn too much attention. Instead, he'd marked her for elimination and spent 2 weeks planning the perfect murder. My phone rang. Tristan, got your blueprints, he said. And some additional intelligence you're going to want to hear. I'm listening. Victor's been asking questions about you. Specifically, he wants to know about Adrian Blackwood's military background. My stomach dropped. How would he even know my name? Because your daughter had your emergency contact card in her wallet. You know, the one that lists you as a security consultant but has your military ID number on it. Stupid. Sloppy. In my grief, I'd forgotten basic operational security. He's done his homework, Adrian. Knows you were special operations. Knows you spent 20 years overseas. And here's the part that'll really interest you. He's scared. Good. Scared enough to put a bounty on your head. $50,000 to anyone who brings him information about your current whereabouts or capabilities. I processed this information. Victor wasn't just covering up his nephew's murder anymore. He was actively hunting me. There's more, Tristan continued. I reached out to some contacts in federal law enforcement. Turns out there's been an internal investigation into Apex Industries for 6 months. Your daughter's murder might have been the distraction Victor needed to move some very sensitive materials. What kind of materials? The kind that make mushroom clouds. Nuclear materials. Victor wasn't just trafficking conventional weapons. He was dealing in weapons of mass destruction. Tristan, I need those blueprints tonight. Already on my way. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started cross-referencing the Apex Industries files with Victor's known associates. The web of corruption was staggering. City councilmen, federal judges, Pentagon officials, all receiving payments through Victor's money laundering network. But one name jumped out at me, Detective Grant Morrison, the same detective who'd handled Page's case, who'd told me it was gang-related, who'd steered the investigation away from Victor's organization. He was on Victor's payroll. I felt sick. The man who'd pretended to care about finding my daughter's killer was the same man who'd helped cover it up. My encrypted phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your daughter died because she saw too much. Keep digging and you'll join her. VC. Victor Castellano. He was taunting me, letting me know he was watching. I typed back. You killed the wrong man's daughter. The response came immediately. I know exactly who you are, Adrian Blackwood. 20 years Black Ops. 37 confirmed kills. 2 Purple Hearts. But you're retired now. Soft. Civilian. You have no idea what you're up against. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed. You're about to find out that some soldiers never really retire. Then I smashed the phone against the wall. Victor wanted to play games. He thought his money and connections made him untouchable. He thought a grieving father would be intimidated by threats. He was wrong. I walked to my closet and pulled out a black duffel bag I hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside were the tools of my former trade. Night vision goggles, combat knife, tactical gear that had kept me alive through 2 decades of the world's most dangerous missions. At the bottom of the bag was something else. A photo of my unit from Afghanistan. 12 men who'd become brothers. 11 of them were dead now, killed in various conflicts around the world. But I was still here, still breathing, still capable of becoming the weapon the government had trained me to be. Victor Castellano had made 2 critical mistakes. First, he'd killed my daughter. Second, he'd revealed himself as a traitor selling American weapons to terrorists. That made this personal and patriotic. The worst combination possible for someone in his position. I started loading my weapons, planning my first strike. Victor's empire was built on fear and corruption. Time to show him what real fear looked like. 3 days of surveillance taught me everything I needed to know about Victor's operation. His restaurant was indeed a fortress, but every fortress had weak points. I'd positioned myself across the street in an abandoned office building, watching through military-grade binoculars as Victor's routine played out. Every morning at 9 a.m., Blake Matthews arrived with 2 bodyguards carrying metal briefcases. Money from the previous night's operations. Dominic Torino showed up an hour later, always scanning the street like the paranoid enforcer he was. But paranoia only worked if you knew what to look for. At exactly 11:30 a.m., a black SUV would deliver lunch from Victor's private chef. Same route every day. Same 2-man security detail. That was my entry point. I spent the afternoon at Felix's warehouse, assembling the tools I'd need for Phase 1. Not the restaurant hit. That would come later. First, I needed to send Victor a message that would shake his confidence and force mistakes. You're going after his money operation, Felix observed, watching me pack surveillance equipment. Blake Matthews. Every Tuesday, he transfers the week's cash through Pinnacle Construction Company, Victor's biggest laundering front. Smart. Hit the money, create chaos in the ranks. Felix handed me a small device that looked like a garage door opener. C, for detonator. Remote trigger with a 2-mile range. Just in case you need to make a dramatic exit. That evening, I followed Blake's armored Mercedes from the restaurant to Pinnacle Construction's offices downtown. Professional 3-car convoy, but they were comfortable. Routine had made them sloppy. I waited in the parking garage until Blake's security team swept the building. 12 minutes later, they gave the all-clear signal. Blake went inside with his briefcases while his men waited by the cars. That's when I moved. The building's ventilation system was standard corporate architecture. I'd infiltrated similar structures in Kandahar. Within minutes, I was in the ceiling above Blake's office, listening to him count money and make phone calls. Yeah, Victor, it's all here. 2.3 million from this week's operations. I'll have it clean and in the offshore accounts by morning. Good. Any word on our Adrian Blackwood problem? Nothing yet. But I've got feelers out. Guy's a ghost right now. Find him. This ends before it starts. Blake hung up and opened his laptop. I watched through the ceiling tiles as he began transferring funds to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Standard money laundering procedure, but he was about to get a surprise. I'd planted a small device on his Mercedes earlier, a military-grade GPS tracker that also functioned as a cell phone jammer. When I activated it remotely, Blake's internet connection died mid-transfer. What the hell? Blake grabbed his phone, but that was dead too. I dropped through the ceiling tiles behind him. Blake spun around, going for the pistol in his shoulder holster, but 20 years of close-quarters combat training made me faster. I had him on the floor with my knife at his throat before he could draw. Blake Matthews. We need to talk. His eyes were wide with terror. You're him, the dead man's father. My name is Adrian Blackwood, and your boss made a fatal mistake when he murdered my daughter. Look, man, I don't know anything about that. I just handle the money. I pressed the knife deeper. A thin line of blood appeared on his neck. $2.3 million. Victor's weekly take from weapons trafficking and drug sales. Where does it go after the Cayman Islands? I can't. Victor will kill me. Victor's not here. I am. And I'm the one holding the knife. Blake's breathing was rapid, panicked. Swiss accounts. Then to a defense contractor called Apex Industries. They used the money to buy surplus military equipment. Equipment that goes where? I don't know, I swear. Victor handles that part personally. I believed him. Blake was middle management. Useful for financial intelligence, but not strategic planning. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to transfer that $2.3 million to an account I specify. Consider it a donation to my daughter's memory. Victor will know it was me. No, he won't. Because you're going to tell him the transfer was intercepted by federal agents. Banking security flagged the transaction as suspicious. Blake's hands shook as he logged back into his computer. Within 10 minutes, Victor's weekly profits were sitting in an untraceable account Felix had set up for emergency extractions. Now comes the fun part, I said. You're going to call Victor and deliver a message. What message? Tell him Adrian Blackwood says hello. Tell him this is just the beginning. And tell him that every day he doesn't confess to murdering my daughter, I'll cost him another $2 million. Blake made the call with my knife still at his throat. I could hear Victor screaming through the phone, demanding to know how this had happened. He was here, Victor, in the office. He's not some grieving civilian. This guy's military. Special forces or something. He knew exactly what he was doing. Perfect. Fear was setting in. After Blake hung up, I zip-tied his hands and feet. You stay quiet for 1 hour, then call your security team. Tell them you were robbed by unknown assailants. Never mention my name or my message. What if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed him photos I'd taken of his house, his wife picking up their kids from school, his favorite coffee shop. Then this conversation becomes much more personal. Blake nodded frantically. I escaped through the same ventilation system I'd used to enter. By the time building security found Blake, I was 3 miles away, listening to police scanners report a sophisticated robbery at Pinnacle Construction. Phase 1 was complete. Victor's money was gone, his confidence was shaken, and he now knew he was dealing with a professional. But more importantly, I'd sent a message that would ripple through his entire organization. Adrian Blackwood wasn't hiding. He was hunting, and the hunt had only just begun. Victor's response came faster than expected. The next morning, I found 3 dead bodies in the parking lot outside my apartment building. 3 young men, probably low-level dealers, each with a single bullet to the head and a note pinned to their chest. Stop now, or more innocent people die. VC. He was escalating, using fear tactics to make me back down. But Victor had made another tactical error. He'd revealed how desperate he was becoming. I called Detective Morrison's direct line, knowing he'd report everything back to Victor. Morrison, this is Adrian Blackwood. I want to report 3 murders outside my apartment. Silence. Then, Mr. Blackwood, where are you right now? Why? So you can tell your boss Victor where to find me. The silence stretched longer. Morrison knew he'd been made. I don't know what you're talking about. Detective Grant Morrison. Badge number 4471. You've been receiving monthly payments of $15,000 from Pinnacle Construction Company, Victor's money laundering front. I was reading from the financial records Nathan had provided. Last payment was October 8th. 3 days ago. Morrison's breathing became audible. You don't understand the situation you're in, Blackwood. I understand perfectly. You're a dirty cop who helped cover up my daughter's murder. The only question is whether you want to live through this conversation. Victor has resources you can't imagine. Federal connections. Military contracts. You attack him directly, and you'll have government agencies hunting you. Let them try. I hung up and immediately drove to a new safe house Felix had prepared, a cabin 40 miles outside the city. Victor would be tracking my phone, my credit cards, anything that could lead his people to me. But I wasn't running. I was repositioning for the next phase. That evening, I monitored police scanners and news reports. The 3 bodies had been discovered, but the media was calling it gang-related violence. Morrison was controlling the narrative, just like he'd done with Page's murder. My encrypted satellite phone buzzed. Felix, your message got through loud and clear. Victor's called an emergency meeting with all his lieutenants. Tonight, 9 p.m. at his private club. How do you know this? Because he's hired additional security from a company I have connections with. 12 ex-military contractors. Professional grade. He's scared. Terrified. Word is he's considering leaving the country until this blows over. That couldn't happen. Victor fleeing would mean no justice for Page. No exposure of the weapons trafficking network. No answers for the families of soldiers who died because of American weapons sold to terrorists. Felix, I need the blueprints for the Belmont Club, and I need them in 2 hours. Adrian, 12 professional contractors plus Victor's regular security means you're looking at 18 armed men. That's suicide. Not if I don't give them a fair fight. I spent the afternoon studying the club's layout. The Belmont was an old speakeasy converted into Victor's private meeting space. One entrance, no windows, reinforced steel door. A trap for anyone stupid enough to walk in. But I wasn't walking in. The building next door was a 5-story office complex, evacuated after a gas leak 2 weeks ago. Perfect. At 8:30 p.m., I positioned myself on the 5th floor with a sniper rifle Felix had acquired. Clear line of sight to the club's parking lot and entrance. Through the scope, I watched Victor's convoy arrive. 3 black SUVs, professional formation. The security contractors took positions around the building while Victor's regular men escorted him inside. I wasn't there to kill Victor. Not yet. This was about sending a different kind of message. At exactly 9:15 p.m., I made my first shot. Not at a person, at the engine block of the lead SUV. The armor-piercing round punched through the hood, and steam began pouring out. The security team immediately went into defensive positions, scanning for the shooter. But I was already moving to a different window. Second shot took out the rear SUV's front tire. The vehicle lurched sideways, blocking half the parking lot. Third shot shattered the club's neon sign. Sparks cascaded down like deadly fireworks. Through my scope, I could see panic spreading through Victor's security detail. They were professionals, but they didn't know where the shots were coming from or how many shooters they were facing. My satellite phone rang. Unknown number. You're making a point. Victor's voice was tight with controlled rage. Just getting started. What do you want, Blackwood? I want you to confess to murdering my daughter. I want you to expose every corrupt official you've bought. And I want you to provide evidence of your weapons trafficking to terrorists. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know I can't do that. Then this continues until you're all dead or in prison. You think you can take down my entire organization? Victor, I dismantled 3 terrorist cells in Afghanistan with nothing but a knife and a radio. Your criminal enterprise is amateur hour compared to what I've faced. I could hear shouting in the background. His security team was probably urging him to move to a more secure location. Here's what happens next, I continued. Every day you don't confess, I eliminate one of your operations. Money laundering, drug distribution, weapons trafficking, one by one until there's nothing left. And if I refuse, then eventually I run out of operations to destroy and start eliminating personnel. The line went dead. Through my scope, I watched Victor's remaining security hustle him into the middle SUV. They sped away, leaving 2 disabled vehicles and a very clear message. Adrian Blackwood could strike anywhere, anytime. But more importantly, I'd accomplished my real objective. Victor's meeting had been disrupted. His lieutenants had seen their boss vulnerable and under attack. Seeds of doubt were being planted. In organized crime, perception was reality. If Victor looked weak, his own people would start questioning his leadership. I packed up my equipment and prepared to leave. Tomorrow, I'd hit Dominic's enforcement operation. The day after that, Oliver's street dealers. Victor wanted to play war games with a trained soldier. He was about to learn why that was the worst decision of his life. Victor's retaliation came at dawn. I woke to my satellite phone buzzing with an emergency alert from Felix. They hit Murphy's Bar 20 minutes ago. Tristan's alive, but barely. 3 of his customers aren't. My blood went cold. Victor was targeting anyone who'd help me, escalating to civilian casualties. How bad is Tristan? 2 bullets in the chest, 1 in the shoulder. He's at St. Mary's Hospital under police protection. But Adrian, there's something else. They left a message carved into the bar's wall. What message? Your friends die until you surrender. And they took his customer records. Every person who's been in that bar in the past month is now a target. I closed my eyes, processing this. Victor wasn't just fighting me anymore. He was waging psychological warfare against innocent people to break my resolve. Felix, I need you to disappear for a few days. Take your family and get out of the city. What about you? I'm ending this tonight. After Felix hung up, I sat in the cabin planning my next move. Victor thought terrorizing civilians would make me surrender. He was wrong. It had just eliminated any moral restraints I might have had. I drove to St. Mary's Hospital and found Tristan in the ICU, machines keeping him alive. His eyes opened when I approached the bed. Adrian, he whispered through the oxygen mask. They came looking for you. When I wouldn't talk, they started shooting customers. I'm sorry, Tristan. This is my fault. No. His voice was barely audible. Your daughter deserved justice. Victor's the one who chose to make this about innocent blood. A nurse entered to check his vitals, giving me suspicious looks. I needed to leave before hospital security connected me to the shooting. Tristan, can you remember anything specific about the shooters? Dominic Torino led the team. But here's what's interesting. One of his men looked nervous. Young kid, maybe 25. When Dominic started executing customers, the kid looked sick. You think he might flip? Maybe. His name's Hunter. Heard Dominic call him that. New recruit. Probably doesn't have the stomach for mass murder yet. I memorized the name. Every organization had weak links. Hunter might be Victor's. That evening, I positioned myself outside Dominic's gym, a front for his enforcement operations. Through surveillance, I'd learned that Hunter worked out there every night at 11 p.m., usually alone. At 11:15, Hunter emerged from the gym, walking to his car in the dimly lit parking lot. Young, muscular, but his body language screamed reluctance and fear. I approached from the shadows. Hunter. He spun around, hand going instinctively to his waistband. Who's asking? The father of the girl Victor murdered. Hunter's face went pale. His hand froze on his weapon. Mr. Blackwood? You know who I am. Dominic said you were some kind of government assassin. Said you'd killed dozens of people overseas. More than dozens. But never innocent civilians having a drink at their local bar. Hunter's shoulders sagged. That wasn't my call, man. Dominic went crazy when Victor gave the order. I tried to stop him. But you didn't. You don't understand. Victor's organization isn't just criminals anymore. He's got federal agents, military contractors, judges on his payroll. Cross him and you don't just die. Your whole family disappears. I studied Hunter's face. The fear was genuine, but there was something else. Disgust. Shame. He wasn't a natural killer. How did you get involved with Victor? My sister overdosed on fentanyl 2 years ago. Victor's dealers sold it to her, cut with rat poison to increase profits. I joined his organization to get close enough for revenge. And I learned that revenge isn't as simple as pulling a trigger. Victor's operation is too big, too connected. Taking him down from the inside would take years. What if I told you there was another way? Hunter looked around nervously. What kind of way? I need inside information. Guard rotations at his restaurant. Security protocols at his private meetings. Details about his federal protection. You want me to spy for you? I want you to help me destroy the man who killed your sister and my daughter. Hunter was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, what's your plan? Victor thinks he's fighting a lone wolf. One angry father with a grudge. He doesn't realize he's up against someone who spent 20 years destabilizing criminal organizations for the United States government. Meaning I don't just kill targets, Hunter. I turn their own people against them. I make them paranoid. I create internal conflicts that tear organizations apart from within. I pulled out a secure phone and handed it to him. This is encrypted military hardware. Untraceable. If you help me, I can give you the revenge you've been planning for 2 years. Hunter stared at the phone. What kind of information do you need? Everything. Victor's daily routines. His safe house locations. Which federal agents are on his payroll. Most importantly, I need to know about his weapons trafficking network. The Apex Industries connection? I felt my pulse quicken. You know about Apex? Victor's been moving equipment for them for months. Military-grade weapons systems. Some of it goes overseas, but lately he's been stockpiling weapons locally. Where? Warehouse complex on the south side. Industrial district near the river. But it's not just storage, they're modifying the weapons somehow, making them more lethal. American weapons being modified by criminals and sold to terrorists. The scope of Victor's operation was even worse than I'd imagined. Hunter, if you help me expose this network, we can save a lot of lives. Soldiers overseas won't die from weapons that should never have left American soil. And Victor dies. But first, his empire crumbles and everyone he's corrupted gets exposed. Hunter pocketed the encrypted phone. When do we start? Now? I need you to go back to work tomorrow like nothing happened. But every detail about Victor's operations gets reported through that phone. What if they suspect me? Then you disappear and I handle this alone. But if we do this right, Victor's own paranoia will make him suspect everyone except you. As Hunter drove away, I felt the familiar satisfaction of turning an enemy asset. In Afghanistan, I'd flipped Taliban commanders against their own leaders. Victor's organization would be no different. The psychological phase of this war was just beginning, and Victor had no idea his own people were about to become his greatest threat. Hunter's first intelligence report came through at 3 a.m. Victor was moving the weapons cache tomorrow night. Destination: a cargo ship docked at Port Elizabeth, bound for Syria. I stared at the encrypted message, my hands shaking with rage. Syrian rebels. The same groups I'd fought against for years. American weapons I'd probably seen used against my own unit were being sold by the man who murdered my daughter. But Hunter's message contained something else. Something that made my blood freeze. V knows about your ex-wife Amelia. Has her address, work schedule, daily routines. Mentioned using her as leverage if direct confrontation fails. Amelia, my ex-wife who still called me on Paige's birthday every year. Who'd cried harder than anyone at the funeral. Victor was going to use her to get to me. I grabbed my satellite phone and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. You've reached Amelia. Leave a message. Amelia, it's Adrian. Don't go home tonight. Don't go to work tomorrow. Get somewhere public and stay there until I call you back. This is life or death. I tried her office number. Her neighbor. Her sister. Nothing. My phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Hunter. Too late. Dominic's team grabbed her an hour ago. Victor wants to meet. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., Riverside Park where your daughter died. Come alone or Amelia dies like Paige did. The location was deliberate psychological warfare. Victor wanted me emotionally compromised, thinking about my daughter's final moments instead of tactical planning. But he'd made a critical error. He thought taking Amelia would make me desperate and reckless. Instead, it had just escalated this from a personal vendetta to total war. I drove to Felix's warehouse, knowing it was probably under surveillance. Didn't matter anymore. Stealth was no longer an option. Felix was waiting with enough firepower to level a city block. Heard about your ex-wife. I'm sorry, Adrian. How did you hear? Because Victor's been broadcasting it through criminal channels. He wants everyone to know he's got leverage over the legendary Adrian Blackwood. He thinks he's won. Hasn't he? You walk into that park tomorrow, you're dead. You don't show up, she's dead. I loaded my tactical vest with ammunition, grenades, and enough C4 to demolish a building. There's a third option, which is, I don't show up at the park. But Victor doesn't get to kill Amelia either. Felix raised an eyebrow. You found where they're holding her? Not yet, but I will. I pulled out Hunter's phone and sent a message. Need location where they're holding the woman. Urgent. The response came immediately. Abandoned textile factory on Elm Street. 12 guards. Dominic's running security personally. Felix, I need a distraction. Something big enough to pull Victor's attention away from the hostage situation. What did you have in mind? That weapons shipment Hunter mentioned. The one heading to Syria tonight. You want to intercept military-grade weapons at a secured port? Adrian, that's insane even for you. Not intercept. Destroy. Along with Victor's entire smuggling operation. Felix grinned. Now you're thinking like the old days. We spent 2 hours planning a coordinated strike. At exactly 6 p.m., while Victor was preparing for our showdown at Riverside Park, Felix would detonate explosives at the port. The weapons shipment, 3 warehouses full of contraband, and Victor's main source of income would disappear in a ball of fire. At the same time, I'd be hitting the textile factory to extract Amelia. What about the park meeting? Felix asked. I'll be there, but not the way Victor expects. At 5:30 p.m., I positioned myself in the abandoned office building overlooking the textile factory. Through my sniper scope, I counted exactly 12 guards, just like Hunter had reported. Dominic was pacing near the main entrance, checking his watch obsessively. He was nervous. Good. At 5:45, I sent Victor a text. Change of plans. Meet me at the factory where you're holding Amelia. Let's finish this face-to-face. Victor's response was immediate. You're not in a position to make demands, Blackwood. Check your port operations. 30 seconds later, the horizon lit up orange. Felix's explosives had found their target. Even from 5 miles away, I could see the fireball rising into the night sky. My phone rang. Victor, screaming with rage. You just destroyed $50 million worth of equipment. That was the warm-up. Now let's talk about Amelia. She dies if you don't surrender in the next 10 minutes. Victor, look out your window. Through my scope, I watched Dominic pull out his phone. Victor was probably ordering him to execute Amelia immediately. But I'd already made my first shot. The bullet caught Dominic's center mass, dropping him instantly. His phone flew from his hand, shattering on the concrete. Chaos erupted around the factory. Guards scrambled for cover, not knowing where the shot had come from or how many shooters they were facing. I picked off 2 more guards before they could radio for backup. Clean headshots, just like the old days in Afghanistan. Victor, are you still there? You son of a bitch. How many men do you have? Just me. But I'm very good at what I do. I could hear him shouting orders in the background, probably calling for reinforcements from his restaurant security. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to walk into that factory, alone and unarmed. You're going to release Amelia. Then you and I are going to have a conversation about my daughter. And if I refuse? I fired another shot, taking out the guard near the factory's rear entrance. Then I kill everyone you've ever cared about, starting with your remaining men. Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The arrogant mob boss was gone, replaced by something desperate and afraid. Adrian, you don't understand the forces you're dealing with. Kill me, and federal agents will hunt you down. My government connections run deeper than you realize. Then you better hope we can reach an understanding. Through my scope, I watched a black sedan pull up to the factory. Victor stepped out, hands visible, walking slowly toward the entrance. But something was wrong. He looked too confident for a man whose empire was burning and whose security team was being eliminated one by one. My satellite phone buzzed with an urgent message from Hunter. It's a trap. Federal agents surrounding your position. Victor's been feeding them your location through your phone signals. Get out now. I looked up from my scope and saw them. Black SUVs moving in from 3 directions. FBI tactical teams with enough firepower to level the building. Victor hadn't just been playing mob boss. He'd been playing federal informant, using government resources to hunt me down. But he'd forgotten one thing about former Black Ops soldiers. We always had an exit strategy. I had 30 seconds before the FBI tactical teams reached my position. The building's fire escape led to the roof, where I'd positioned a motorcycle for exactly this scenario. But I couldn't leave without Amelia. Through my scope, I watched Victor enter the factory. He was still too confident, which meant the federal agents weren't here to arrest him. They were here to eliminate the problem he couldn't handle himself. I grabbed my gear and moved to the building's service elevator, pressing the button for the basement. If the FBI was surrounding the building, they'd expect me to go up or out, not down. The basement connected to the old city tunnel system, built during Prohibition for moving illegal liquor. I'd memorized these tunnels during my initial reconnaissance, knowing I might need an underground escape route. 20 minutes later, I emerged from a storm drain 3 blocks away, behind the textile factory. The FBI teams were still positioned around my original sniper nest, waiting for a target who was no longer there. I approached the factory from the rear, using the shadows and my military training to avoid detection. Through a broken window, I could see Victor standing in the center of the main floor, looking nervous despite his earlier confidence. Where is she? Victor was speaking to someone I couldn't see. Upstairs, like you ordered. Dominic's voice, but different. Strained. I'd hit him center mass, but he was wearing body armor. I moved to a better position and saw Amelia tied to a chair on the factory's 2nd floor. She was conscious, alert, and apparently unharmed. But 3 armed guards surrounded her. My encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Hunter. FBI teams aren't here to help Victor. They're here to clean up loose ends. Orders came from high up, eliminate everyone involved, including Victor. The scope of the corruption was even deeper than I'd realized. Victor wasn't just paying off local cops and federal agents. Someone in Washington wanted this weapons trafficking network buried permanently, along with everyone who knew about it, including my daughter, who'd witnessed Julian's murder, including me, the former Black Ops soldier who'd gotten too close to the truth. I sent Hunter a message. Are you safe? For now, but they'll come for me next. Victor's been making a list of everyone who might know about Apex Industries. I had to move fast. The factory was a kill box designed to eliminate both Victor and me in one operation. The FBI would blame it on a gang war, close the case, and the weapons trafficking would continue under new management. I entered through the basement loading dock, moving silently through the building's maze of old machinery and abandoned workstations. The smell of rust and decay filled the air, reminding me of bombed-out buildings in Syria. On the main floor, Victor was pacing nervously. This was supposed to be a simple exchange. Blackwood shows up, we eliminate him. Everything goes back to normal. Nothing about this situation is normal, a new voice replied. Federal agent, by the sound of his authoritative tone. Your weapons trafficking operation has drawn too much attention. Washington wants it shut down permanently. What about our arrangement? I've provided intelligence on 3 rival families. That has to count for something. It did, until you let a former Black Ops soldier discover our entire network. Now you're a liability. Through a crack in the machinery, I could see the speaker. Tall man in a dark suit, probably FBI or CIA. 2 other agents flanked him, hands resting on their weapons. Victor was beginning to understand he'd been played. You're going to kill me too. Unfortunately, yes. Along with your ex-soldier problem and anyone else who knows about Apex Industries. What about my federal protection? My immunity deal? Expired the moment you lost control of this situation. I'd heard enough. These weren't just corrupt officials. They were traitors selling American weapons to terrorists and murdering witnesses to cover their tracks. My daughter had died because she'd stumbled onto a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Time to end this. I moved to the staircase leading to the 2nd floor, where Amelia was being held. 3 guards, but they weren't expecting an attack from inside the building. The first guard went down with a knife to the throat before he could scream. The second managed to draw his weapon, but took 2 bullets to the chest. The third guard panicked, firing wildly as I rolled behind an overturned table. Amelia, stay low. I called out. Adrian? Oh my God. How did you talk later? Move now. I cut her restraints and handed her my backup pistol. Do you remember how to shoot? It's been 20 years, but yes. Gunfire erupted from the main floor. The federal agents had heard the commotion and were moving to investigate. There's a fire escape on the north wall, I told Amelia. Get outside and don't look back. What about you? I have unfinished business with Victor. Amelia hesitated, then kissed my cheek. Don't get yourself killed for revenge, Adrian. Paige wouldn't want that. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about justice. She ran toward the fire escape while I moved back toward the main floor. Victor and his federal handlers were arguing about exit strategies, unaware that their hostage had escaped. I positioned myself behind a support pillar with clear sight lines to all 3 targets. Victor Castellano, I called out, my voice echoing through the empty factory. They spun toward my voice, weapons drawn. But 20 years of urban combat had taught me patience. Your daughter saw something she shouldn't have, Victor shouted back. Just like you did. This ends tonight, one way or another. You're right, I replied. It does end tonight. Then I stepped out from behind the pillar, rifle raised, ready to finish what Victor had started when he murdered my daughter. Before you pull that trigger, Blackwood, there's something you need to know about your precious daughter. Victor's words stopped me cold. My finger was on the trigger, the federal agents in my sights, but something in his voice made me hesitate. She wasn't just a witness, Victor continued, his hands raised but his voice steady. She was working for us. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, Adrian, how does an art student afford that expensive apartment near campus? How does a coffee shop worker drive a brand new Honda? My mind raced. Paige's lifestyle had always seemed beyond her means, but I'd assumed her mother was helping financially. Agent Morrison, show him the file. One of the federal agents pulled out a manila folder and tossed it at my feet. Inside were photographs of Paige meeting with various men in suits. Bank records showing regular deposits to her account. Surveillance footage of her entering a government building. Your daughter was recruited 6 months ago, the lead agent said. Art students make perfect covers for intelligence work. They travel freely, attend social events, have access to all kinds of people. I stared at the photos, my world crumbling. One image showed Paige shaking hands with someone I recognized, Nathaniel Cross, the NSA analyst who'd given me the encrypted files about Apex Industries. She was feeding information to the government about Victor's operation, the agent continued. But she got greedy, started selling intelligence to both sides. That's impossible. Paige would never. Your daughter was playing 3 different intelligence agencies against each other, Victor interrupted. CIA, FBI, and NSA. Each one thought she was their exclusive asset. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my daughter's murder was wrong. The night she died, Victor continued, she wasn't sketching in the park by accident. She was there to document Julian's execution for her government handlers. But she made the mistake of trying to blackmail me afterward. Show him the recording, the federal agent ordered. Victor pulled out his phone and played an audio file. Paige's voice, clear and unmistakable. I have photos of you killing Julian. Transfer $2 million to this account, or they go to the FBI. I dropped my rifle. My daughter, my innocent, artistic daughter had been blackmailing a mob boss. The S carved in her forehead wasn't Victor's signature, the agent explained. It stood for spy. It was a message to other intelligence assets about what happens when you double-cross your handlers. Who killed her? My voice was barely a whisper. I did, Victor said simply. On orders from Agent Preston here. Your daughter had become a security risk to a classified operation spanning multiple government agencies. Agent Preston stepped forward. Paige threatened to expose not just Victor's weapons trafficking, but the entire intelligence network we'd built around it. Apex Industries isn't just a defense contractor, it's a CIA front company. Those weapons going to Syria? They're being used by assets we control to destabilize hostile governments. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. My daughter hadn't stumbled onto a crime, she'd been part of it. But here's the real twist, Adrian, Victor said, his confidence returning. We didn't just recruit your daughter randomly. We recruited her because of you. What? 20 years Black Ops. 37 confirmed kills. You were one of the most effective operators in military history. We needed someone close to you. Someone who could monitor your activities after retirement. My legs nearly gave out. Paige was spying on me. For 3 years, Agent Preston confirmed. Every conversation you had, every contact you made, every job you took as a security consultant. She reported everything to us. Why? Because some of your former targets survived, Adrian. Terrorist leaders, cartel bosses, foreign intelligence officers. They've been planning revenge against the man who destroyed their operations. We needed to know if any of them made contact with you. Victor laughed. Your own daughter was your handler, Blackwood. The ultimate irony. I picked up one of the surveillance photos. Paige at a restaurant with a man in a suit, envelope changing hands. My daughter, the government spy, selling secrets for money. She was going to expose everything, Preston said. The weapons trafficking, the intelligence networks, the classified operations in Syria. All for $2 million. So you had her murdered. We had a security risk eliminated. Just like we eliminated dozens of other compromised assets over the years. The factory fell silent except for the distant sound of sirens. The FBI teams outside were probably wondering why the shooting had stopped. Here's what happens now, Preston continued. You walk away. Forget everything you've learned. Go back to your civilian life and pretend this never happened. And if I refuse, then you join your daughter in the ground, along with your ex-wife, who's currently in federal custody. Victor smiled. She never made it to that fire escape, Adrian. My men were waiting outside. They had played me perfectly, used my grief, my love for Paige, my need for revenge to lead me into a trap that eliminated multiple security threats in one operation. But they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed I was still the same man who'd followed orders without question for 20 years. You want to know the real twist? I said quietly, reaching into my tactical vest. What's that? Victor asked. I've been recording this entire conversation. I pulled out a small device, military-grade audio recorder with satellite uplink capability. Everything they'd confessed had been transmitted in real time to journalists, congressional oversight committees, and international human rights organizations. Preston's face went white. You son of a bitch. My daughter may have been a spy and a blackmailer, I said, raising my rifle again. But she was still my daughter. And you killed her to protect your illegal weapons trafficking operation. Adrian, wait, Victor started. But I was done waiting. Done listening. Done being manipulated by people who treated human lives like chess pieces. The warehouse erupted in gunfire as 20 years of suppressed rage finally found its target. The gunfight lasted 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, Victor lay bleeding on the concrete floor, Agent Preston was dead, and the third federal agent was crawling toward the exit with a shattered leg. I stood over Victor, my rifle pointed at his chest. He was still alive, but barely. "Adrian," he gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. "You think you've won? This network spans decades. Killing me changes nothing. Maybe not, but it changes everything for me." I knelt beside him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "You want to know what your mistake was, Victor?" He couldn't speak anymore, just stared at me with fading consciousness. "You thought my daughter was just another asset to be eliminated. But she was never just a spy or a blackmailer or a security risk." My voice cracked with emotion. She was a 23-year-old girl who got caught up in something bigger than herself. And despite everything she did, everything she became, she was still my little girl who used to paint flowers on napkins. Victor's eyes closed for the final time. I stood up and looked around the factory. 3 bodies. Evidence of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of approaching sirens. But the recordings had already been transmitted. By now, news organizations across the country were receiving audio files of federal agents admitting to murder, weapons trafficking, and treason. Congressional committees would be convening emergency sessions. Apex Industries would be shut down within hours. The weapons pipeline to Syria was broken. My phone buzzed with a message from Felix. "Amelia is safe. Extracted her before the feds could grab her. She's asking about you." I walked toward the factory's rear exit, stepping over the bodies of men who'd thought they were untouchable. Outside, I could see helicopter searchlights sweeping the area, but the tunnel system would get me out unseen. As I reached the exit, I turned back one last time. This factory had been the end of Victor's empire and the beginning of justice for everyone who died because of his greed. But it was also the end of something else. The end of my need for revenge. The end of the rage that had consumed me since that phone call at 3:47 a.m. My daughter was gone. Nothing would bring her back. But her death had exposed a network of corruption that would have continued killing innocent people for years to come. Maybe that was her real legacy. Not the spying or the blackmail, but the chain of events that brought down traitors selling American weapons to terrorists. 6 months later, I sat in a small cafe in Oregon, reading newspaper headlines about the congressional hearings that had resulted from the recordings. 15 federal agents indicted. 3 Pentagon officials arrested. Apex Industries dissolved. The weapons trafficking network was finished. Amelia walked into the cafe and sat across from me. We'd been meeting like this once a month, trying to process everything that had happened. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about it. About killing Victor? No. About not seeing who Paige had become before it was too late? Every day. She loved you, Adrian. Whatever else she was still your daughter. I know. That's what makes it hurt so much. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd lost the same person but in different ways. "What's next for you?" Amelia asked. "I don't know. For 20 years, I had a mission. For 6 months, I had revenge. Now, I'm not sure what comes after justice. Maybe just living," she said softly. "Maybe that's enough." As I walked back to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness. That might take years to find again. But peace with the choices I'd made and the price I'd paid for them. My phone buzzed with a message from Hunter, who was now in witness protection after testifying against Victor's organization. "Saw the news about the final convictions. Paige would be proud of what you accomplished." Maybe she would be. Or maybe she'd be horrified by the violence it took to get there. I'd never know for sure. But as I drove away from that cafe, heading toward whatever came next, I carried with me the memory of a little girl who painted flowers and grew up to become something neither of us had expected. She was gone. But her story, our story, had finally reached its end. And for the first time since that terrible phone call, that was enough.